My name is Adora Svitak, and if you're wondering why a 12-year-old is teaching you today, well, at the age of 7, I published my first book called Flying Fingers, Master the Tools of Learning Through the Joy of Writing. And more recently, I published a second book. It's called Dancing Fingers, and it's a book of poetry that I co-authored with my older sister, Adriana. So I really love to write, especially poetry. I published a book of it, and I think that poetry is one of the coolest things you can do. Well, for one, it's convenient. You can just sit down and write it pretty much anywhere. And for second, one of my favorite types of poetry to do is writing funny poems. So what do you think makes something funny? Any ideas? What do you think makes something funny?
Randomness.
Randomness? Yes, that definitely contributes. Randomness, what else?
Weird animals.
Weird animals? Definitely.
Megan. Some made-up words.
Made-up words, that's right. Have any of you ever read the poem Jabberwocky?
Yeah.
I hear some yeses, I hear some no's. Well, Jabberwocky, what's funny about Jabberwocky is that a lot of it is made-up words, but what's even funnier is that because of that poem, we got some new words in the English language, so kind of interesting idea. So randomness, weird animals, made-up words. Let's get one more thing. What makes something funny?
Ching-ching. Humor.
Humor. Yeah, exactly. Humor pretty much is funniness, so definitely. So here's kind of our list of ingredients for a good funny poem. We have randomness. We have weird animals and made-up words and humor. So, to me, what makes something funny? Well, whether it's your friend farting in class, I'm hoping no one's ever done that, or Calvin getting attacked by his school lunch, funny things are funny because they are unexpected. You don't think they're going to happen, so kind of random. For example, you wouldn't expect a sneeze to be wet enough to soak a shawl or to be heard in outer space, but some of my favorite poets, such as Shel Silverstein, wrote funny poems, and I enjoy reading funny poems. Why do you think you might enjoy reading funny poems?
What do you think? Yeah. To entertain people?
To entertain, exactly. I like reading funny poems because they're entertaining, and I like writing them because they can entertain other people and sometimes yourself. So I enjoy writing funny poems for that reason. So in order to make your poetry come across as really funny, one thing you can do is tip number 1, to make a poem fun and ridiculous, exaggerate a real life event. Anyone want to tell me what exaggerate means?
Shane.
Like, to just say it, like, overstate it.
To overstate it, yeah, pretty much. When you exaggerate, you're kind of stretching the truth. You're taking one thing and making it seem bigger than it really is. So lots of tall tales come about because of exaggeration. So maybe, who knows, maybe Paul Bunyan came out because there was some really tall guy, and they just exaggerated a little bit and made him really, really tall. So exaggerating can work really well for poetry as well. So, for instance, let's use this example. I could turn some small mistake that my sister made in the kitchen while flipping pancakes. I could turn that into a dramatic, electrifying poem. Don't believe me? Well, here's how it might happen. Let's say my sister, she took the pancake, she flipped it, and a little bit of batter slid out of the pan and got on her shirt, so it kind of stained it. Alright, so that's what really happened. Now, if I were to exaggerate that, I might say that she grabbed the pan, she threw it into the air, and time paused for a second as the pan hovered right there. And then splat! Everything came down right on top of her new, very expensive, crystal-embedded dress, just as my dad pulled into the driveway ready to take her to her first concert at Carnegie Hall. Yeah, so, way exaggerate. And you can do that kind of thing. That's poetic license. You can talk about that a little bit. And so you can take something that happens in real life and sort of stretch it out for. Now here's an example. All of you have sneezed before, right? Raise your hand if you've ever sneezed before. I'm seeing a lot of raised hands. Yeah, I'd be very suspicious of any of you who haven't. Well, I'm not sure if all of you have sneezed so hard that you soaked the cheese in a sandwich. Anyone done that? I'm hoping not, that's kind of gross. Well, I wrote a poem about a very impossible sneeze. So here's this poem, it's pretty long. The sneeze. I must hold in a dreadful sneeze. I beg you to excuse me, please. I know my trumpet is a great disgrace. I'm willing to accept my loss of face. I sneeze much to the public's dismay. I humbly beg you for me to pray. For I have the feeling that my soul is torn. It's not only my throat that's too well worn. I know that Lady Cunningham was disgusted. I know that I'm a scoundrel, not to be trusted. I know that I shouldn't have come at all when I knew I might ruin the Countess's shawl. My grandaunt had to sell her brass samovar. My sneeze and the storm were quite on par. The lessons at school could barely be heard, because I always sneezed through every word. Now half the household's sick, the others die. My grandma spanked and my grandma cried. I swear now that I'm sneezing in fear, but I can't squeeze out a morning tear. I'm being shut up like a rabid dog. My windows are blocked with extra thick logs, and I can tell you it's no use to fight. There's a guard outside my door at night. I only got hankies for my present this year, that and a book of small font Shakespeare. I wish that my sneezes went to outer space, that way they wouldn't be such a waste. Maybe an alien would hear the noise and know of other living boys. Send an expedition to planet Earth. Then my sneezes would have some worth. But now from dreams I must retreat and try not to sneeze. I have to look neat. To attend a party of great renown. The most important party in our town. All I can hope is that I don't have to talk, because the sneeze will creep out like a slug from a rock and earn me another reproving stare. Oh no, here's a sneeze, I tell you, beware. I sneezed on the sandwiches, soaking the cheese. I sneezed on the silver for catering fees. I beg you to excuse me, please, oh please, forgive me for my deplorable sneeze. So that's my poem, The Sneeze. And obviously it's thank you. Very long poem, and so if you think about it, I definitely exaggerated quite a bit. Well, let's say you sneeze when you're, walking onto a bus or something, and if you wrote a poem that was exactly true to life, it might go something like this. I sneezed when I was walking the bus. My friend said, bless you. A few minutes later, I forgot about it. That would be a very interesting poem, would it? No, probably not. So sometimes exaggeration can really work in your favor. And exaggerating can make something as mundane as a sneeze into a terrifying, kind of life-threatening situation, as in this example, and funny. So we can use our imagination to exaggerate real-life events and turn them into exciting, interesting poems. What do you think is something from your life that you could exaggerate?
Maybe like Halloween one year, like you tripped and fell in a puddle of mud and lost all your candy.
Yes, you could describe that very well. You could kind of describe the sickening moment when your candy flies out everywhere. And so that would definitely be something to write about. And in fact, that one sounds interesting even without too much exaggeration. But yeah, that's very great. So, I think I'm getting a little hungry, so I'm going to walk over to the kitchen and grab something to eat. Let's take a look. All in the name of poetry, of course. So there's the refrigerator. Alrighty, so now that I've grabbed something to eat, let's think of something to write a poem about. So firstly, let's take a quick look at what I grabbed out of the refrigerator. Anyone want to guess what is inside of this?
Okay, Morgan, red peppers?
Red peppers? No, not quite. Let me zoom in a little bit. It's hard to see a distance. They look kind of purple, actually.
Okay, Albert.
Eggplants, yeah, precisely. Okay, so I grabbed out some eggplants, which happen to be one of my least favorite things to eat, unfortunately. But how do you think I can get my idea to write a poem from eggplants?
What do you think, Justin?
Maybe by exaggerating on how they talk or something. Like if they talk, exaggerating on that.
Yeah, exaggerating. And another thing I could do is, let's say I really don't like eggplants and I have to eat them in a meal, maybe exaggerating how gross their taste is or how awful I feel. Yeah, as you're saying. So that would be a perfect thing to do. What else could we write? How else could we get inspired for a poem from eggplants?
What do you think, Megan? Maybe like one of your enemies or something would go and start throwing eggplants at you or something.
That's a very creative idea. That would be wonderful for a story. So maybe one of your enemies just takes us apart and starts throwing eggplants. I would do that actually, except my mom would get pretty mad. So, eggplants. Here you have. They're not just edible, and they're not just pretty cool purple-looking food. They're also poetry inspiration. So next time when you're heading over to the refrigerator or something and pick something out, that can be a great poem. Now, speaking of food, then I actually wrote a poem called Lunch, which is all about a gross meal. Why are you looking so gloomy? People will think that you're quite loony. I say this will cheer you up. Why don't we have a pick-me-up? Poisoned hog is a good place to eat, just as long as you like meat. There's gory beef and bloody pork. Watch out, there's boar skin on your fork. Here's the special, tortured duck. Oh, and here's another, chicken luck. The waiter's coming, here he is. Would you like some cheddar fizz? Let's see, I'll have goose with moose. Would you like the lamb caboose? There's special cake of Spam today, served to you on a fish head tray. Still not feeling like eating steak? Oops, my dear, my mistake. So that's the poem Lunch. And it's all about this kind of gross meal at some kind of restaurant that serves some pretty disgusting types of meat. And you can do that, let's say if you eat a meal that you don't like at dinner, or when you go to a restaurant, turn that into a poem. And of course the restaurant wasn't as bad as I made it sound. We didn't have to really have tortured duck or cheddar fizz. But I took some creative liberties in the poem, as you probably realized. Now, something that I run into a lot is that when people think poems, they think of like really beautiful, delicate flowers or something pretty. But when you write poems, you don't necessarily have to be writing about really pretty things. You could also be writing about things that you dislike, things that, like for instance, how much you loathe eating your vegetables, something like that. So, here is an activity along that line. Write a poem that exaggerates an event or activity you don't like. So we're going to be doing this one together. So step number 1 is to choose an activity or event that you dread. So what do you really, really, really dread doing? So for example, taking the garbage out. Anyone want to give us an idea? What do you really, really dread doing?
Ellen.
Doing homework.
Doing homework. That's, okay, what else?
Kaden.
Doing the dishes.
Doing the dishes. Yep, those are infamously difficult. Okay, dishes.
Eddie. Cleaning your room.
Cleaning room. Okay, what else?
Michael. Going to school.
Oh, let's try thinking a different one. We already have homework, so
Isaiah.
walking the dog.
Just walking in general.
Walking in general. Okay, so you would rather just sit and be wheeled along. Okay. That's the first time I've heard that one. Alrighty, who else?
Hannah. Getting out of bed in the morning.
Getting out of, yeah, I can sympathize with that one.
Justin. My dog, whenever I get home, basically repeating that.
What was that?
My crazy dog.
Oh, you have to wash him?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay, there we go. So, a bunch of tasks or activities that you dread. So, doing homework, washing dishes, cleaning room, walking in general, getting out of bed in the morning, and cleaning greasy dog. Now, think about what makes you dislike this activity or event so much. So, for instance, mine, taking the garbage out, it smells bad, it takes up time I could be spending doing something fun. What is it that you so dislike about cleaning your room?
Do you like?
Yeah. It takes a long time.
It takes a long time. So, time. What else?
It exerts too much effort.
Too much effort? Yes, just like walking, it exerts too much effort.
If your room is really messy, you may have to pick up stuff that you've never
so it's kind of, there's a little bit of an ick factor, like it might be dusty or something.
In my room at one point I found like moldy cheese under my shoes.
Okay, wow. You really have not touched that for a long time. Yeah, when you find moldy cheese on the floor, I think that's a good time to really reconsider where. Alrighty, I'll just put moldy cheese as a reason right here. Okay, great. So, clean your. What about walking? I think walking is a hilarious one. Okay, so what is so bad about walking?
It like takes too much energy.
Too much energy. Okay, if it takes too much energy to walk, I'm trying to think what wouldn't take too much energy, but, alright, what else?
If you're doing it for gym class and you walk like 2 miles, it just takes so long and your thighs start hurting.
Okay, time, and then, like, it hurts. Okay, great. So, we've, done a few of what we hate so much about the activity, what we dislike. Now, and this is not having enough space, so I'll probably have to insert a new page, but what are some details you dislike about this activity event? So we did some general things. Well, for example, for the taking out the garbage, the gross smell of rotting food, sometimes the bag leaks, and it's super heavy. So to go on to a new page here, let me just insert a page. All right, here we go. So for walking, you mentioned that it makes your legs hurt, so you could legs hurt all over. Great, and then for cleaning the room, what are some other details about cleaning the room?
Perfect. It like gets you tired, then you're like thirsty and you have to get a drink.
Okay, so it takes a lot of energy, makes you thirsty. Great, so we want to focus on these specific details. What else?
Emily.
It gets really boring sometimes.
Tedious? Okay, great. So now that we have some of these details and we know what makes us dislike these activities so much, it's time to exaggerate the details. So for instance, for taking the garbage out, if I put the gross smell of rotting food, then the exaggerated detail would be the smell was so bad that it woke up the whole neighborhood. Then for sometimes bag leaks, it's super heavy. It could say the bag leaked flooding our house, and it was so heavy that I broke my arm. Super exaggerated. Okay, so now that we have come up with these details and stuff, let's exaggerate them. So for walking, your legs hurt all over. How could we exaggerate that?
If your legs hurt so much, they're gonna fall off.
Okay, legs hurt so much that they're gonna fall off. Yes. Okay, great. That's a nice visual there. Alrighty, what about for cleaning your room? It takes a lot, you're thirsty and it's tedious. How can we exaggerate that?
Justin?
You get so thirsty you cannot even breathe anymore.
Okay, you get so thirsty. I'm actually not sure if there's a big correlation between being thirsty and not being able to breathe, but that's fine. Okay, so you get so thirsty you can't breathe, and it sounds really boring, like super boring. How can we exaggerate tedious? Like maybe it's so boring that,
It's so boring that your brain melts.
okay. Okay. Great. So, now that we have our exaggerated details, the only thing left is to write a poem. But for now, we can only write one poem. So which one do you think we should write about, walking or cleaning your room? Raise your hand if you think we should write about walking. Okay. Raise your hand if you think we should write about cleaning your room. Looks like walking is pretty obvious. Okay, so let's write a poem about how hard it is to walk. This is so funny that it's like not even, well, it is funny. Okay, so, oh, and then the second thing is, should we have it rhyme or should it not rhyme?
Right.
Okay, rhyme. Alrighty, so let's start with going back to the list of details. Okay, so how about the amount of effort it takes? Walking is so difficult. Walking is so difficult. It's really very hard. And then we can rhyme the last line with hard. What is another thing to describe walking, how difficult it is?
Michael.
It hurts so badly that your legs can fall off and you can like drop dead.
Okay. Walking is so difficult, it's really very hard. Your legs hurt so bad they might fall off. Oops.
That doesn't rhyme. They might fall into the yard.
Oh, wait, okay. Here. So this is, I was thinking we would have A, B, C, B. So the kind of rhyming, so difficult doesn't rhyme with off, as you know, but we'll have walking is so difficult, it's really very hard, your legs hurt so bad they might fall off into the yard, or something like that, as the last line. Or what do you want the last line to be here? I mean, not the end of the poem, just of this stanza.
Peter, is that what you said? Into the yard? Is that what you said? Yeah.
He did say into the yard.
Okay, your legs hurt so bad, they might fall off into the yard. Okay. Walking is so difficult, it's really very hard. Your legs hurt so bad, they might fall off into the yard. Maybe they might fall off in the yard. See, when you're writing a poem, you want to make sure that it sounds pretty good when you're reading through it, because that's one of the really important things of poetry. So, walking is so difficult, it's really very hard. Your legs hurt so bad, they might fall off in the yard. That sounds a little better. Okay. Great, so what is the second stanza going to be about? So we've written about how hard it is and how it hurts. What else should we write about?
You think, Megan?
There's a chance that you might step on a stick and get it lodged in your shoe like I did.
Okay. There's always a chance that that you'll step on a stick. Was that what you said?
Yeah.
Get it lodged in your shoe and get permanently sick. A little exaggeration.
If I could have your attention for a quick announcement. Any boy that participated in the baseball team this year, that CMS baseball team, grade 7 or 8, you are going to have a celebration get-together in the cafeteria after school today. Thank you.
Now, I wonder why, announcements for a celebration, it's too bad they can't route it just to the 7th and 8th graders, because everyone else hearing that is like, oh man, a celebration, why can't we go? That's just what I'm thinking. Anyway, but, okay, so back to the poem. There's always a chance that you'll step on a stick and get it lodged in your shoe and get permanently sick. Does that work? I was kind of exaggerating, like if you... Alright, what's the next stanza going to be about? So, the chance that you'll step on a stick, what about the time it takes? So walking is slow, unbearably slow. It takes so much time out of my day. What else would I write? Okay. Walking is slow, unbearably slow. It takes so much time out of my day. Any other complaints?
By the time I get home, I get ready to hit the hay.
Okay. It makes me so tired that right now I just want to hit the hay. Alrighty, so let's read the poem. Walking is so difficult, it's really very hard. Your legs hurt so bad they might fall off in the yard. There's always a chance that you'll step on a stick, get it lodged in your shoe, and get permanently sick. Walking is slow, unbearably slow. It takes so much time out of my day. It makes me so tired that right now I just want to hit the hay. Okay, there we go. Woo! So you can easily come up with a poem like this one just by thinking of an idea, what's something I don't like to do, walk, and then what are some details I don't like about it, exaggerate those details, and voila, you have your poem. Quick and very simple. So, that is kind of one of the easy first steps that you can take. If you're stuck for an idea for a funny poem, you can just think about something you don't like to do and write about it. Tip number 2, you can get lots of inspirations for poetry from the things that you see around you. So for example, trees, houses, coats, sidewalks, plastic containers, snowflakes on the ground. When it comes to poetry, you also don't really have to stick with the facts. Again, this kind of poetic license, all you have to do is find something you want to write about, and you're pretty much free to do what you want. Okay, so for instance, you can look at an everyday object, and instead of writing about it, write about what it brings to mind. So when you look down at your table, what does that bring to mind?
Albert.
Math?
Say that a little nicer, Albert. He said math.
Oh,
What else? Alex.
English? Okay, so pretty literal. You're thinking maybe, looking at that desk, you're thinking about what you do on it. You do English or...
Samantha.
I go back to my imagination and I think it's flying carpet.
You think of flying carpet. That's really cool. And actually, you know, that makes sense because, just to show you my desk here, I could really imagine kind of just hopping on it and flying off. That might actually be kind of interesting, although I don't recommend hopping on your desks at the moment. No. Do it when your teacher's not around, okay? Actually, don't do it even then. You'll fall over. I know from experience. Alright, so you can look at this everyday object like a desk and imagine flying carpets, right? About what it brings to mind. You could even write about sitting on a desk and flying off. You can even bypass the carpet. So, for instance, you could look at an everyday item. Let me find an everyday item. Okay, let's say a trophy. It's kind of an everyday item. Most people might have one or two. So if you have this trophy, then you could look at it and imagine that it had magical power. So what kind of magical power do you think the trophy would have?
Brandon.
It can turn into a sword.
It could turn into a sword, so maybe the moment I hit it, it could be like some magical sword. Actually, this trophy, the top of it is pretty sharp, so it's already a good weapon anyway. Yeah, so it could turn into a magical sword. What else do you think a simple trophy could do?
Michael.
It has the magical power to sit and do absolutely nothing.
Yeah, the best power of all. Very true, very true. To sit and do absolutely nothing. That takes some real skill right there. Okay, so, yeah, very clever. You will be a great ridiculous poet. Alrighty, so you can look at an everyday object and think about magical powers or a lack of them. You could write a poem about a tree that is really the castle of a squirrel king, or that just sits and has leaves every year. And let's see, another example, you see a beetle crawling around on the ground, you could imagine that it was a magical scarab beetle, just to give you kind of that examples. Alright, so here are some activities you can try on your own. Write a poem that exaggerates a real life event, so that was what we were doing earlier. Write a poem about an ordinary object that has magical properties. Look at an ordinary object and write a poem about something that it brings to mind. And then some more stuff you can do. You can write poems based on the subjects you study in school. So what are some things you've learned about recently?
Luke.
Algebra.
Algebra? So what have you been learning about in algebra?
The properties that solve problems algebraically.
Okay.
He said he learned to solve problems algebraically.
Okay, great. So how do you think you could write a poem about that?
Hippos doing algebra.
You could write one about doing algebra. Why is everyone laughing? But okay. Well, it would be hopefully a very funny poem. So that's the point. You get everyone laughing. Alrighty. So one thing I've learned about recently is balancing chemical equations. I don't know if any of you guys have touched on that yet in science. Yeah, well, that's kind of difficult. It's interesting, but it is definitely a little difficult. So balancing chemical equations, I could definitely see writing a poem about that and maybe complaining a little bit. So whatever you learn about in school can provide all kinds of interesting material for poems. For instance, it would provide you with new words and new ideas that you could use in your poems. Here are some reptile words. These would be pretty cool to use in poems. Black mamba, vertebrate, striated, tetrapod, cold-blooded, scales, crocodilia, sphenodontia, squamata, testudines, animalia, three-chambered heart, atria, ventricle, salties, inland taipan, and desert death adder. Who would like to have a desert death adder as a pet? I'm seeing some brave raised hands. I mean, I know. Like, I have a guinea pig right now, but imagine if, and she's like kind of in the entryway, so when people walk in, they see her, she's off to the side. Now, imagine if instead of that guinea pig right there, I could point to this weird creature and I'll say, hi, this is my desert death adder, by the way. You want to hold it? Yeah, so that might scare off some of the marketers that come knocking. Alright, so reptile words, you can include those in poems. Here are, oh wow, I put way too much text on this, sorry, but here are some more ideas. You could write a poem inspired by something you found on the sidewalk. Anyone ever found something really interesting on a sidewalk? A dead bird! Oh, I hate when that happens. One time, we were looking at this house that was for sale, and they had the worst salesmanship skills. You know why? Because walking up to the house, there was this dead, smashed bird right by the door, okay? I don't know what was going on with that, but not good marketing. Alright, so inspired by something you found on the sidewalk. Anyone else have something interesting they found on the sidewalk?
Children's drawings when they were little.
Children's drawings from when they were little. So that kind of thing, that might be an interesting thing to write about. Finding children's drawings from when they were little on the sidewalk. You could write a poem about me wondering how they got there. That would be interesting. One thing that I found on the sidewalk once was, well, everyone has found pennies on the sidewalk before, of course, but what I found was I found one penny, I walked along, there was another penny, and then there were 5 pennies in succession. So that was kind of interesting. You don't see too many pennies in a row usually. I guess someone's wallet was just leaking. And then, let's see, another thing you could write about is write a poem that represents a vocabulary word from school. So for instance, I don't have it on hand right now, but I actually wrote a poem called Insolent, representing the word insolent, and it was all about kind of a character who was insolent. You could write a poem exaggerating an event from PE, write a poem exaggerating what happened when you had to give a report to your class, write a poem about a neighbor you've never met, or a weird food item you spot at the grocery store, which you will find pretty often, actually. Alrighty, so, okay, there we go. Now, I want to share another funny poem with you from Dancing Fingers. Let me quickly find it, and it's, here we go. Okay, here we go. It's called Words. So I said earlier, or just now actually, write a poem that represents a vocabulary word from school. So kind of along that line, I wrote this poem called Words, and it is about vocabulary. Words are always deliciously nice to write or speak, so precise. Sweet words and words so sour, cookbook words like pastry flour. Words that wave their arms at you, like for instance, peekaboo. Words that meander gracefully along, usually found in quiet songs. Words and insults that shout and stomp. Shadowy words like marsh or swamp. Delicate words like china or tea. Stormy words like ocean or sea. Words that sound perfectly luxurious, or weirdo ones like uxorious. Archaic words in old Shakespeare, and words that sound drab and drear. I love pretty much every word, from Brobdingnagian and on to purd. Though it might at first sound quite scary, you ought to expand your vocabulary. So that was my poem Words from Dancing Fingers. Oh, thank you. Great, well now that we've gone through the main presentation, I just want to know, who would like to tell me one thing you've learned today about writing ridiculous poems?
Justin, you need lots of exaggeration.
You can use your thoughts and exaggerate them, very good. Who else would like to tell me?
Shane?
You need lots of items.
You need lots of, sorry?
Items.
Lots of items, he said?
Oh, items, yeah, you can definitely use items really easily. Like you can take a look at eggplants, for instance, and get an idea for poetry from that. Yeah, exactly.
And
It can be a lot of fun.
It can be a lot of fun, Exactly. That's the most important thing, that you have fun. The rhyming or the structure, that doesn't matter. The most important thing is you have fun. Well, I mean, the rhyming structure matters. Just the most important thing is having fun. Okay, so now, do any of you have any questions for me?
Emma, do you go to like public or private school, or are you homeschooled?
I actually go to an online public school, so it's a lot like a regular school in that we have field trips and teachers and homework, and in the upcoming week we have to take the state test, which I'm pretty nervous about. But in other ways it's pretty different. So for instance, we have the curriculum on the computer, and in that way it's a little bit like homeschooling, but it is a public school.
Now, what grades did you skip?
What grades did I skip? Well, I'm 8th grade right now, and I skipped, I guess I ought to be in 7th grade, so I just skipped that. But I'm also taking some high school classes. That's another reason I go to an online school, is that I can take the high school classes in conjunction with my 8th grade classes.
Amanda, what's your favorite Harry Potter book?
What's my favorite Harry Potter book? Oh, I love the 3rd and the 7th.
Isaiah,
What's your favorite and least favorite subject?
What is my favorite and least favorite subject? I have so many favorite subjects. Well, my 2 favorites would probably be, and the ones I'm best at, would be language arts and social studies. But then I don't really have a least favorite subject because I like them and they're all pretty interesting, but I'm definitely not as good in math and science.
Griffin.
Did you ever consider like singing your poems as like short songs?
Not really. The main reason being that I have an awful singing voice. You've never heard me singing. I don't think you want to. And then the second thing being is that, I guess, yeah, I haven't really thought about that. I don't listen to a whole lot of music. My sister is the musician in the family, so if I ever wanted my poems sung, I'd probably get her to do it. And then I would be distrustful of whether she would do a good job. So I'm just kind of paranoid like that.
Aubrey, what's your favorite food?
What is my favorite food? Definitely not these. I was just thinking of this. But I really like, stupid me, actually I really like eggplant parmesan if it's like in a lasagna. I just don't like them like that. They're just scary if they're the big purple. Anyway, so I love lasagnas, and okay, so my favorite types of food: Indian, Italian, Indian as in from India. Indian, Italian, and I like sushi as well.
Madeline, how do you know what kind of poems you want to write about?
I'm sorry?
How do you know what kind of poems you want to write about?
How do I know what kinds of poems I want to write about? Usually I just get an idea. A lot of times it'll be that I kind of have the first sentence in my head and I'm playing around with the phrasing, and then I have to write down the first sentence or else I'll forget it, right? So I write down the first sentence and I think of another sentence and I keep on typing, and voila, there's a poem. It's obviously a lot harder work than that because I also have to think about how it rhymes, how it sounds, but that's usually how I get the idea. Kind of, I think of a first sentence or something that sounds really cool and I think, that would do on a poem.
Becca, how did you feel when you published your first book?
How did I feel when I published my first book? Pretty amazing. That would be I think the best word to describe. Pretty amazing. When I was holding this book in my hand, I was like, man, that girl on the cover is not me. It's like a different version of me or something, because it really was a weird feeling holding the book, and it's still pretty amazing when I look at this book and I'm like, man, my name is in print and everything. So that's always been cool. Actually, when I was little, I was sort of pretty obsessed about getting my name printed. So I loved having and I still love having frequent flyer cards or something that had my name emblazoned on them. And I was so jealous of my sister because when she put her tooth under the pillow, then she would get this long letter from the tooth fairy. And I didn't have any baby teeth coming out, but I sure wanted that long letter from the tooth fairy. So I kept on complaining about that to my parents, and then one day I woke up, and guess what? There was a nice long letter from the tooth fairy for me, so that was pretty cool. Sorry if that went off topic. Just about how I like having my name in print.
Play any sports?
Do I play any sports? Not too many. Actually, I sort of sympathize with the person who said that they didn't like to walk, because while I'm not that quite that extreme, well, I mean, I like going on hikes and I like doing casual kind of stuff, but I've never been a big like soccer person or yeah.
What made you want to become a writer?
What made me want to become a writer? A lot of things. I would say one of the first things is that I really love to read, and I saw what these authors that I was reading, or what they were up to, and I thought, well, I want to do something kind of like that. I want to be like them. And so I started writing, and I, when I was 6, my mom bought me my first computer, and I started typing it up, and soon I had this really big collection. Let me just quickly show you. Here it is. So this is the amount of writing I had by the time I was 6, I believe.
How and when did you get your first book published?
How and when did I get my first book published? Good question. Well, I published my first book, Flying Fingers, when I was 7, and I went through a lot of rejections from many different publishers. Some children's publishers even saying they didn't work with children, which was a little strange. And then also and then finally I called up this publisher. It was called Action Publishing. It was a small little publishing house in California, and I was lucky enough to get the publisher on the phone. And so that was kind of how we really started with this journey that became the end result, Flying Fingers.
Is there anything in particular that inspires you the most?
Is there anything in particular that inspires me the most? Good question. I would say a lot of it is the authors that I read, but also my family. My family always provides a lot of support, and they're always there for me, and they're also pretty comedic sometimes, so I get inspiration a lot of times from them. Oh, and then another thing that provides inspiration, I just noticed this stuffed tiger out of the corner of my eye. Animals always do provide a lot of inspiration. I love to write animal poems, and that's actually a good tip, is to look at animals.
Albert? Have you ever written a poem out of anger?
Have I ever written a poem out of anger? Oh yeah, definitely. For instance, let's see, I might be able to find it actually. I used to play piano and violin. I say used to because I no longer do, and one of the reasons, or at least maybe contributing a little bit, was because I love to write, and I wrote this poem about how bad I was at music and how great I was at writing, and why I should no longer have to play piano and violin. So that was one poem that I wrote kind of out of anger.
Do you have a pet, and what is your favorite animal?
Do I have a pet? Yes, I do. A guinea pig named Minnie, and she is kind of a tri-colored guinea pig, very cute. Guinea pigs are a type of rodent, and they look a little bit like rabbits, only without the ears, smaller and less jumping power. And my favorite kind of animal, well, I like guinea pigs a lot, obviously, since I have one. I'm a little partial, but I also love certain types of dogs. I say certain types because other types freak me out. And let's see. I also like what is that odd animal? Oh, platypuses. Platypuses. They're so cute. And I'm drawing a blank. What are my favorite animals? Okay, let's just stick it there. Guinea pigs, platypuses, and certain types of dogs. And cats.
What is your favorite book that you read? Like, what's your favorite book ever?
What is my favorite book? I have a lot of favorite books. I love the Harry Potter series, Chronicles of Narnia, The Giver by Lois Lowry. Let's see, what else? Any books by, well, let's see, Lord of the Rings, Anne Rinaldi's books, Gloria Wieland's books, Catherine Called Birdie is another good book. Yeah, all of those.
Brandon, what's the hardest thing about writing a poem?
What is the hardest thing about writing poems? Well, for me, sometimes finding a good rhyme. I love to write rhyming poetry, and sometimes I just really want to find a rhyme, but I'm like, what rhymes with difficult, let's say? Difficult is a very difficult word to rhyme because not much rhymes with it. So yeah, sometimes you'll get a really weird word that sounds great in the poem, but you can't rhyme a single thing with it. That's always pretty hard.
Do you have any advice for kids who are starting to write?
Yes, I would say definitely don't worry what other people think of your writing, because while it's great to get feedback and comments from others, it's also important to write for yourself. And remember that you are one of your most important critics, and that when you begin writing, you should definitely be writing for yourself and not worry too much about what other people think.
How long did it take until you published your first book?
It took me about half a year to get it all put together and edited and all of that. Yeah, so about half a year. The stories themselves are pretty straightforward. They only took a couple of weeks, but then, putting them all together, editing that took a little while.
What do you do when you're not writing poetry?
What do I do when I'm not writing poetry? I would say I do a lot of stuff when I'm not writing poetry. Writing poetry is not like what I do as a full-time job or anything. I do it occasionally, but it's not full-time. I would say, let's see, I love writing other kinds of things like stories and blog posts. I also love playing outside, drawing, cooking, reading, hiking, doing pretty much a lot of things, and watching the news.
If you're trying to write a story and you hit a wall, what do you usually do?
For me, I have a few different things that I might do. One tip I've actually heard is to kind of find the point where you have that wall and backspace until you're thinking, this is where I really want to continue from. So sometimes giving yourself a new start and taking out some things that kind of drove you into that wall. But then the second thing is maybe putting it away for a couple of days, letting your mind come up with new ideas, and then looking at it again.
How did you get started with poetry and literature?
How did I get started poetry and literature? Well, my family has always been really big on reading, so from a young age I've had books all around me, and I loved reading. When I was 3 and a half, I started reading, and I think that inspired me quite a bit. My start with poetry is kind of related. When I was around 7 or 8, well, I loved to read poetry, but I wasn't so crazy about writing it. So my mom said, I'll buy you all the poetry books that you want if you just write me a couple of poems or something. So she bought me poetry books, I wrote a couple of poems, and I found that I really liked it. So, yeah.
Anybody else? Shane, one more. Did you like doing this with us?
Did you like doing this with us? Why else would I be doing it? Of course I like doing this with you guys. It's really fun always to video comments with someone new. And by the way, what state are you in?
Where are you from?
I'm in Washington. I am in Washington State, so does anyone know where Seattle is?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, you're going there this summer? Nice. Okay. So, let's see. Washington, I am right around here. Oh, sorry, my mouse is probably not visible. Just around here, this area right here, near Seattle. Okay, so that is where I am. And then more to give you kind of a bigger view, I'm in this studio right now. So as you can see, it's actually in my house. It's in the basement of my house. You can see the windows out over there. And my mom is over there. She just came downstairs. And that's the refrigerator where I went earlier. I love playing around with the zoom and the swivel and everything. It was so fun. Okay, so does the teacher have any questions or comments?
I have just one question. I have seen your blog online. It's wonderful. And I was wondering, are you going to write anything on your blog about Carson Middle School and our experience with you today?
Yes, I would love to. Actually, I was planning on posting that poem on my blog, so I will write a little bit about you guys and definitely about this experience. Thank you very much for asking.
Well, we look forward to that. Thank you so much for working with us today.
Thank you very much. And by the way, if any of you want to get in touch, you can definitely go to my blog and leave comments, and you can also go to my website and write to me there. I'd be happy to write with you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. And thank you, you streamers. I hope that you all have a wonderful day and enjoy writing ridiculous poetry.